Welcome back to the Detroit Lions draft coverage here for the 2022 NFL draft that is quickly approaching, and we are trying to get to the bottom of who we think Detroit will draft at number 2 overall. Alongside Tim Twentyman of DetroitLions.com, I'm Dannie Rogers. The only way for us to make this very educated guess on who we think Detroit might take is figuring out who's going number 1 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
We don't control our own destiny, right?
We
We've got
don't.
to wait and see what happens at number 1. And so what a perfect fit to bring in the people who would know best.
Now I know why the people were so mad about Detroit winning that last game against Green Bay is because you do have that number 2 overall position where your destiny is controlled. And it is controlled more or less by Jags team reporter Ashlyn Sullivan and senior host and reporter JP Shadrick. Thank you guys so much for joining us from hopefully sunny Jacksonville today.
A little cloudy, actually, but yes, things are heating up here in Jacksonville. We're only a week away, crazy enough. And yeah, Danny, it has been incredibly hard to predict this draft. A little different than last year, JP.
Much different than last year. It was obvious a season ago that Trevor Lawrence was going to be the guy at number 1 overall, but now you just don't know there's no consensus at the top of these mock drafts.
Correct. It has been a very weird draft phase here. So we are doing this for the people, for the fans. We are trying to give you as much insight on what we've heard inside the buildings as humanly possible. So I want to start off with Ashlyn and JP. I need to know, what is the weirdest or hottest take you've heard on who might go number 1 overall to you guys?
I'll say the weirdest I heard, and I heard it way back when we were at the combine. Someone asked me the thought of drafting Kenny Pickett as a backup quarterback, number 1 overall. And
Wow.
I kind of just looked at them for a couple seconds and just kind of walked away because that was the weirdest take I've ever heard in my entire life. No, they're not going to take a quarterback number 1 overall. I would say I don't want to call it the hottest take, but Aiden Hutchinson is the take that everyone's talking about. So I'll call it the hottest take because it's the most popular take. And it seems to be the direction the Jaguars are going, but you know how this works. You plan. You have all these questions planned out from, and then they take someone else because that's just how life works. Right, JP?
Yeah, that's right. I don't know if I have one that matches Kenny Pickett, 'cause that's kind of out there, but I'll say that, 2 months ago, it was going to be Evan Neal. It was a slam dunk Evan Neal. And then all of a sudden they franchise tag Cam Robinson at left tackle, and they're working on a long-term deal with him. So that offensive tackle talk came back a little bit. Trayvon Walker starting to come up now, the Georgia defensive lineman who was behind some really good defensive linemen the last couple of years and then finally got on the field last season and started to really show some things. So I think that's the one that we didn't really hear about Trayvon Walker in this regard until, a month and a half ago. Is that real? That's the great question. And even inside the building, 3 doors down from the draft room, nobody really knows right now what's going on inside there.
Tim, I feel like we feel the same sentiments. What is the weirdest take you've heard at number 2 overall?
Well, I don't think there's been crazy weird ones. There certainly isn't the Kenny Pickett at number 1. That's just insane. I'm with you right there. But, I think Malik Willis at number 2. I mean, here's a guy that was playing quarterback at Liberty, and now all of a sudden he's projected to be the number 2 pick in the draft. I think that's been a huge jump. And Trayvon Walker, too. I mean, you look at some of the mocks and some of the stuff before the combine, and he was in the teens, 20s in terms of where he ranked in this class, and now all of a sudden he has a terrific combine. He hasn't changed anything on film, but all of a sudden now you're talked about the number 1, number 2 overall pick. That's been a huge jump for him. So, I think those 2 maybe jump out to me the most is Malik and Trayvon, just how much they have jumped in this draft to the top.
To help Lions fans out a little bit, head coach Dan Campbell spoke with Detroit Lions media, and he said that number 2 overall pick has to be a day 1 impact starter. So that kind of shut down the Malik Willis rumors, but the people were up in arms. They were not happy that Malik Willis may not go number 2 overall. So I can imagine Jacksonville Jaguar fans maybe were okay with Kenny Pickett not going number 1 overall.
Yeah, you could say the least.
Yeah.
Trevor's a bit of a lock here. We don't need to ruffle any feathers around here.
He's on every billboard in town. I'd say he's a lock. He's going to be here for a while, and they're already kind of crafting it, I would think, for when he has to come due for his next contract.
Yeah.
Let's play and win some games before we get to that point. But yes, he's locked. He's here.
Okay, that's what I figured. We have to address the needs of each team, which is certainly going to help in slotting in those prospects into number 1 and number 2 overall. JP and Ashlyn, we've talked offensive line for Jacksonville, but it seems like that has kind of been buttoned up here in the offseason. So what are the biggest needs for Jacksonville that might be filled with that number 1 overall spot?
I think it's Aiden Hutchinson and you talk about Walker as well. They both fill that need of the other side of Josh Allen at defensive end. They need more game wreckers. And frankly, they need players that can become franchise players. Those billboard players we just talked about with Trevor Lawrence. And frankly, this team won 3 games last year. So there are a lot of needs that you could fit in. But I think the biggest thing, JP, that stands out has to be defensive end. And that's why, to me, Hutchinson is the slam dunk. It fills a need with a great player.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think there's still a little work to do on the offensive line, but there's work that can be done at number 33 overall or 3rd round in the draft on offensive line. Maybe you get another center and, hopefully Tyler Linderbaum is there at 33 overall. They have Tyler Shatley, who's been around here for a long time, but maybe they bolster that spot. They have some questions at left guard still, who's going to play there. So yeah, it really just sets up for, if that's out of play at number 1, defensive line guys are the guys that are there at number 1. And that's what you're going to go for, because there are some really good wide receivers. That's another need for this team, is a deep threat receiver, consistent down the field. They don't have that yet. Is that a number 1 overall pick? There's no Keyshawn Johnson in this draft right now. So he was the last receiver, I think, to go number 1 overall. That's something we'll have to address a little later in the draft also.
I'm just curious, guys, is it Aiden Hutchinson or nobody at defensive end? Does anybody else fit, just maybe coaching staff-wise, schematically? Is it Aiden Hutchinson and that's kind of the conversation, or does anybody else kind of fit that mix as an edge rusher as well?
I think they like Walker. I mean, honestly, it's just what's not to like about him, because he is a little versatile also. You can put him inside if needed, but they put him outside a lot at Georgia, and he held his own a bunch of different ways. And I think that's something that Brinson Buckner, the defensive line coach, will like, is his versatility. But then Hutchinson's a monster. He's bigger than you think. I mean, he's 6'5"?
We saw him walking through this building, and it was, whoa,
huge.
But I think the smoke is a little bit real about Walker, and it has certainly crept up, JP, the past couple of weeks. And Danny, I was with you at the combine, and this was a guy we really didn't pay much attention to at number 1 overall. And then that stellar combine performance, you're hearing the rumors. I do think there's some truth to that. And I think Hutchinson and Walker are closer than people think. So it is going to be really interesting.
So my question is, why isn't edge rusher Kayvon Thibodeau? Why has he not come up at all in this conversation when there's a lot of mock drafts mocking him to Detroit at number 2?
Well, and before the college season finished, that was the name, right?
Yes.
It was tank for Thibodeau. That was the conversation. And so what has happened that he's not even in that mix anymore? Yeah. It's really interesting to me. And I think that's the one player at the top that I'm really interested to see where he fits. Is it Detroit at number 2? They've certainly done their homework on him. I mean, Brad went out and saw that UCLA game when we were out playing LA. They met with him at the combine. They brought him in here. They went out to his pro day in Eugene. So they've done their homework on him. So it'll be interesting. That's one name I think that's very interesting at the top of the draft. And it's interesting that he's not part of Jacksonville's conversation at number 1, because at the college season, before that college season ended, that was all the talk, right, guys?
No doubt. I'm curious how much he truly can hold up in the run game, though. At number 1 overall, at least in my opinion, Ashlyn, I don't know what you think about it, but you got to be on the field more than just 3rd down, and be out there 1st and 2nd, and be able to at least hold up and more than just 1 down in every possession. That's my opinion.
No, I agree. And I think when you talk about Hutchinson as well, the off the field is what stands out with him. And Danny, I know you know him and his family very well. He seems like he has all the intangibles to be the best locker room guy. And the state of the Jaguars right now, if I'm Trent Baalke, I want to know for certain this is a franchise defining player. And I think Hutchinson is the closest thing to that. I don't want to cross my fingers and hope. I have to know with this pick, this team won 3 games last year. So I'm going to go with the surest thing. And that has to be Hutchinson for me.
Is offensive tackle definitely out of the mix for you guys at number one? I know you talked about the Cam Robinson and working on that deal, but having a deal and working on a deal are a little bit different. And if you look at value at the top of the draft, obviously we talk about quarterbacks and pass rushers, but it's those guys that protect the quarterback too. And to get a dynamic young guy like Neal and the kid from NC State look to be, is that out of the mix for you guys at number one?
It's not out of the mix.
Not at all. They wouldn't shock me at all.
No, it wouldn't me either. But again, it goes back to that versatility thing. If they feel like they can get the Cam Robinson deal done that they're trying to do, right, then that person you drafted number one better have some versatility to play at left guard or at right tackle or whatever that is. But hey, and the other argument is, why would you draft a guard or a right tackle at number one overall when he's going to be playing that for 3 or 4 years? So that's the balance here. Like we said, there's some other things they can do, but maybe they can do them a little later in the draft. That's why I feel, we haven't heard anything negative about those negotiations with Cam Robinson. So let's go with that.
Yeah. And you also don't want to reach for a need. If Evan Neal is the highest grade and the best player available at number one, and you feel like he has a higher ceiling than Hutchinson, by all means, take him, because you can figure it out for the next couple of years. That's the thing that I think is so important with this draft is, yes, they need defensive end, but they need so many things. So if that offensive lineman has a better grade, take him, because at this point, this franchise just needs more good players. If he's the best player, take him.
I like how you said that, Ashlyn, the highest ceiling. And I've heard Trayvon Walker on tape against Aiden Hutchinson and Kayvon Thibodeau potentially has the higher ceiling. So, Tim, I know the biggest needs for the Lions, it's coming on that defensive side of the ball. It's not just because the best players in this draft potentially are along the edge of the defensive line.
Yeah, well, you just look at last year and where the Lions ranked just across the board defensively. They were the bottom third in a lot of the major defensive statistical categories. They just need more guys that can affect the quarterback, more guys that can get hands-on footballs. And so when you look at needs, Detroit's 30 sacks last year were the third fewest in the league. Their, pass rush win rate was the second lowest. Their quarterback pressures were the third lowest. So they just need that guy that can, be on the edge and affect the quarterback. Now, obviously, re-signing Charles Harris, he had 7.5 sacks last year. It was on a prove-it deal, and he proved it, and he earned a deal. And getting Romeo Okwara back, a double-digit sack guy just a couple years ago from that Achilles injury, that'll all help. But I just think they need a young guy, a dynamic guy on the edge that can just really affect the quarterback. You like their depth at cornerback, some of the young guys they have there, but you can't ask those guys to sit there and cover guys for 3-4 seconds sometimes that we saw last year. You have to be able to get the quarterback off his spot, speed things up. And so at number 2, I just think when you talk about best player available plus need, that just fits the best for Detroit at number 2.
I think it does as well. Okay, JP, Ashlyn, is there any chance Jacksonville considers a trade here in this 2022 NFL draft?
I think they'd love a trade.
Depending on what you're saying. Danny, what are you giving up?
You keep hearing, okay, Detroit might want to trade up to get Aiden Hutchinson. I don't know what it's going to take for Jacksonville to give up that, but I've heard some rumblings. Trades could be lurking for Detroit. I just want to know if they're lurking for Jacksonville, if you guys might trade out of that number 1 spot.
I think Trent Baalke, the general manager, is always open to hear offers, right? I mean, that's the phone lines are open, let's say, but there's no quarterback at the very top. That's what pushes those big time blockbuster draft day trades, is that quarterback position. Now, is it out of the question that it could happen in other ways? Would the compensation be much different for a trade up? I think so. So you're not going to get quarterback compensation for a defensive line in this kind of draft, in my opinion. So I'm sure the phone lines are open, whether it's ringing or not, Ashlyn, I don't know.
Yeah, we heard the report a couple weeks ago from NFL Network that there were no phone calls yet. And that didn't really surprise me, because why would you make a phone call this early on? We expected to possibly be the day of. What's interesting is there are reports that Jacksonville isn't in love with the number 1 overall pick, by means that there's not one guy that stands out drastically from the other guys. That's why I think a trade is really interesting. Say it's Detroit with Hutchinson. If they feel like Hutchinson is not that much greater than Walker, all right, then a trade makes sense. But if you're absolutely in love with the number 1 overall pick and who you slotted it to be, then a trade's not going to happen. And that's what's interesting, JP, is we don't know that. We don't know if they have absolutely fallen in love with one prospect we haven't heard that yet.
All right, we've still got a week to go.
Yeah.
So we'll find out, I guess, when everybody else does. I know either way, Todd Washer's going to have fun dealing with whatever defensive lineman shows up in Detroit.
Yeah.
He's a character. We love Coach Walsh over here. Tim, so I've got to ask you, are there any lurkings of a possible trade down or up for Detroit?
Well, a lot like, they talked about, that's quarterback driven typically. But I couldn't say, and like I talked about at the top, what drives it is quarterbacks, obviously, pass rushers, and then guys that can protect the quarterback. Yep. And I think with those two tackles, I think if there is an opportunity to trade down, I think maybe it's with those two tackles.
Yeah.
I think, some team might really think that one of those guys is their franchise left tackle. And look, those guys are hard to find. And so if you believe that at number 6, 7, and you want to make sure you can get one of those guys, I think if we see a trade down by Jacksonville, Detroit, and one of those top teams, I really believe in this draft it'll be for one of those tackles.
Okay, all right. Let's answer the question. Ashlyn, JP, I'll have you guys go first, one by one. Who is Jacksonville taking number 1 overall in the 2022 NFL Draft?
Oh, you're putting us on the spot. I did this with you a couple days ago, Danny, and you were so hesitant. So now I'm curious to hear your answer. I'm going Aiden Hutchinson. You heard me the past 10 minutes. I think he's the slam dunk pick. I want a sure thing. The Jaguars need a sure thing right now. He's the closest thing to it. Sign me up.
I'm with you. I've gone back and forth on this one, just watching a lot of Georgia games the last year, and Walker stood out. And yes, he had a fantastic combine, but Aiden Hutchinson is a guy that you can plug and play, and he'll be a good 10, 12-year, hopefully, player in the NFL. You need something calm, something steady right now, and I think that's the steady answer, Aiden Hutchinson.
Tim?
So Aiden's off the board?
Aiden's off the board, it sounds
right.
like.
So
That's
Aiden's
why we
off
had
the
them go
board.
first. Yes.
So Aiden's off the board. I think then it comes down to if you still want to get that pass rusher, which I think they want. Then you're talking about Trayvon Walker, Kayvon Thibodeau, and my sleeper, who I really, really love in this draft.
Love this guy.
I love Jermaine Johnson.
Yes.
I really, really do. I think he sets an edge. I've never seen a Senior Bowl like he had since Aaron Donald in 2014. He just fits everything, but that might be a little bit too high for him. It wouldn't be for me,
Okay.
but I think at number 2, it's really I think Trayvon Walker fits. I mean, the lines are going from a 3-4 to a 4-3. So with him and that size and athleticism, he can play anything from the 3 technique to the 9. And so I think Aiden Hutchinson is that same player, can do the same thing because of his size and skill set. So I just think that fits with the athleticism, no character issues, all that kind of stuff. It just a plug and play number 2 pick. I think if Aiden's off the board, I think Trayvon Walker fits.
Okay, I'm wrapping this up with my prediction. I will say, coming from a Michigan alum, I am happy that there's a chance Michigan will beat Georgia in something this year. And I think it's Hutch going number 1 overall. And then I really like Trayvon Walker. I'm hopping on the Walker train. That Georgia defense was just... It was scary, and it was by committee, but you could find some gems in that defense that really got it done individually. I think Trayvon Walker did that. I think he will fit this scheme, and Coach Walsh will have a day having him along that defensive line, wreaking havoc for quarterback. So, I'm jumping to the Walker train. There it is, people. Take it, write it down on a piece of paper. Don't forget it. That's who we think is going to go number 1 and number 2 overall. JP, Ashlyn, thank you guys so much for joining us here in Detroit.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us. And we probably can rip up that paper when nothing goes according to plan, because that just seems to be the trend lately.
All heck could break loose next week, but it's great to be with you both. Thank you.
Have fun next week, guys.
You too.
Thank you. You guys too.